Have you ever noticed how the most desperate people are also the loudest? How those who scream the hardest for attention are the ones who command the least respect? There's a reason for this, and once you understand it, everything about human nature becomes crystal clear. Imagine for a moment that you're standing in a crowded room, sharing your deepest struggles, your most profound pain. You're pouring your heart out, expecting sympathy, understanding, maybe even help. But look closer at the faces around you. Really look. You'll see polite smiles masking boredom. You'll notice people checking their phones. You'll watch as they slowly drift away to more interesting conversations. This isn't cruelty, this is reality. And the sooner you accept this reality, the sooner you can stop being its victim and start being its master. Most people spend their entire lives in this desperate dance, performing their pain like actors on a stage, waiting for an audience that will never truly care. They broadcast their wounds, announce their struggles, and wonder why the world keeps walking past them without stopping. They've built their identity around being understood, being helped, being saved. But here is what they do and realize. They're reconstructing their entire sense of self on the most unstable foundation imaginable. Other people as emotions. Think about the last time you genuinely cared about a stranger's problems. Not the polite concern you might show, but deep, losing sleep over it care. How long did that feeling last? A few minutes? An hour? And this was someone you chose to care about. Now multiply that fleeting attention across everyone you meet, and you begin to see the harsh mathematics of human empathy. It's finite, selective, and almost always self-serving. The men and women who shape history understood this truth instinctively. They didn't waste energy trying to make people care about their journey. They focused on making people care about their results. There's a profound difference between seeking sympathy and commanding respect. One makes you dependent. The other makes you dangerous. But recognizing this truth isn't enough. Most people see it and become bitter. They rage against the unfairness of it all. They retreat into resentment, spending years nursing wounds that nobody else even remembers inflicting. This is the path of the weak, to see reality and demand it be different. The path of the powerful is to see reality and use it as fuel. When you truly accept, not just intellectually, but in your bones, that nobody owes you care, something remarkable happens. The part of you that was constantly reaching out, constantly explaining, constantly justifying your existence, begins to die. And in its place, something far more potent is born: self-sovereignty. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about becoming strategically selective with your emotional energy. Every moment you spend seeking validation is a moment stolen from building something that doesn't require validation. Every breath you waste explaining your pain to those who won't understand is breath not used to forge yourself into something undeniable. Consider how most people handle setbacks. They immediately look for shoulders to cry on, ears to bend, voices to validate their suffering. They turn their private battles into public performances, hoping someone will play the role of savior in their personal drama. But what happens when no savior comes? What happens when the audience gets bored and leaves? They collapse because they've built nothing that can stand on its own. Now imagine a different approach. Imagine taking that same setback and treating it like raw material. Not something to be displayed, but something to be processed. Not something to be shared, but something to be transformed. When you stop broadcasting your struggles and start mining them for strength, you discover something that changes everything. Your pain has value, but only when you stop giving it away for free. The world doesn't reward suffering. It rewards results. It doesn't celebrate your journey through hell. It pays attention to what you brought back from the flames. And the faster you internalize this truth, the faster you can stop wasting time on the journey and start focusing on the treasure. This shift requires killing something inside yourself. The part that believes people should care simply because you're human. the part that expects fairness from an unfair universe, the part that waits for permission to be great. These parts of you are unserving you. They re-enslaving you to the whims and moods of others. When you stop expecting care, you stop being disappointed by its absence. When you stop seeking understanding, you stop being frustrated by confusion. When you stop waiting for help, you stop being paralyzed by solitude. And in that space, that quiet, self-contained space, you begin to discover what you're truly capable of when you're not performing for an audience. The most powerful people in any room are usually the quietest, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned the difference between speaking and being heard. They understand that attention given too freely becomes worthless. They know that respect earned through silence carries more weight than love begged for through noise. This is where most people fail. They mistake visibility for influence. They think being loud means being strong. They confuse sympathy with power. But true strength operates differently. It doesn't announce itself. It demonstrates itself. It doesn't seek attention. It commands it. And it never, ever begs for what it can take. When you accept that no one cares about your struggle, you stop struggling for their attention and start struggling for something far more valuable, your own respect. And once you have that, once you've proven to yourself that you can stand alone, endure alone, and rise alone, something shifts in how others perceive you. People can sense desperation from across a room. They can smell need, hear the subtle plea in your voice, feel the weight of your expectations pressing against them. And unconsciously, they step back. Because desperation is contagious, and most people are already carrying enough of their own. But they can also sense the opposite. They can feel the presence of someone who doesn't need them, doesn't want anything from them, doesn't require their approval to exist. And that energy, that self-contained, self-sufficient energy, is magnetic in a way that neediness never is. This is the paradox that unlocks everything. When you stop needing people to care, they start caring. Not because you've manipulated them, but because you've become someone worth caring about. Someone who exists independently of their opinion. Someone who moves forward regardless of their support. Someone who represents something they wish they could be, but aren't brave enough to become. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. You'll be tempted to fall back into old patterns. You'll have moments where the silence feels suffocating, where the indifference of others stings like salt in an open wound. You'll want to reach out, to explain, to make them understand. This is where most people break. They can't tolerate the discomfort of not being seen, so they go back to performing their pain, back to begging for attention, back to building their identity on the shifting sands of other people's emotions. But if you can endure those moments, if you can sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood without trying to correct it, if you can watch people walk away without chasing after them with explanations, something powerful begins to solidify inside you. A core that doesn't bend, doesn't break, doesn't require external reinforcement to maintain its shape. You begin to move differently. Your posture changes because you're no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's potential judgment. Your voice changes because you no longer modulating it to please ears that may not even be listening. Your entire presence shifts because you're no longer broadcasting need. You're radiating sufficiency. And people notice. They may not understand what's different about you, but they feel it. They sense that you've crossed some invisible line, that you've become someone who operates by different rules, someone who doesn't fit into the usual categories of weak and needy that they reuse to managing and manipulating. This is when your real education begins. Because now you're not just surviving in the world, you're restarting to understand how it actually works. You see the games people play when they think no one is watching. You notice the strategies they use to get what they want. You observe the patterns of power and weakness that govern every human interaction. And most importantly, you realize that you've been playing by the wrong rules your entire life. You've been trying to win at a game called being loved, when the only game that matters is called being essential. And the first rule of becoming essential is simple. Never let anyone think you need them more than they need you. The moment you truly stop caring whether people care about you, you enter a territory most will never see. It's not a place of bitterness or isolation. It's a realm of pure strategic clarity. Here, every interaction becomes data. Every relationship becomes a calculation. Not cold calculation born of cruelty, but precise assessment born of wisdom. You begin to see people as they actually are, not as you hoped they might be. You notice who stays when you stop giving, who calls when you stop calling, who remembers your name when it's no longer trending. This isn't about testing people for sport. It's about understanding the real architecture of human loyalty. And what you discover will reshape everything you thought you knew about relationships. Most connections aren't connections at all. They're transactions disguised as friendship. People stick around as long as you provide something: entertainment, validation, resources, or simply the comfort of being needed. Remove the transaction and watch how quickly the connection dissolves. This isn't a condemnation of humanity. It's simply how humans are wired. We're survival machines dressed up as social creatures, and survival rarely includes carrying dead weight. Once you see this clearly, without the romantic fog of wishful thinking, you stop being hurt by it. Instead, you become fascinated by it. You start to understand the mechanics of influence, the psychology of power, the hidden currents that move beneath every social interaction. And with understanding comes the ability to navigate these currents instead of being swept away by them. The people who command genuine respect, not the fake respect born of fear or the shallow respect born of pity, but the deep respect that opens doors and moves mountains. These people understand something fundamental about human nature. They know that people don't respect what they can have easily. They respect what they have to earn. They don't value what begs for attention. They value what remains mysterious. They don't chase what chases them. They chase what walks away. This is why your new silence becomes your greatest weapon. Not the dramatic silence of someone sulking or the manipulative silence of someone withholding affection, but the comfortable silence of someone who has nothing to prove. When you stop trying to convince people of your worth, they start trying to discover it on their own. When you stop advertising your strengths, people start noticing them naturally. When you stop performing your intelligence, your competence speaks for itself. But here's where most people stumble. Even when they understand these principles intellectually, they try to fake this detachment. They play hard to get without actually being hard to get. They pretend not to care while desperately hoping someone will notice their pretense. This performance of indifference is worse than obvious neediness because it's both desperate and dishonest. Real indifference, the kind that gives you actual power, can't be performed. It has to be earned. It comes from genuinely having other options, other priorities, other sources of meaning that don't depend on any single person's approval or disapproval. It emerges from building a life so rich and purposeful that other people's opinions become interesting but not essential. This is why the work has to be internal first. You can't fake having options if you don't actually have them. You can't pretend not to need validation if your entire sense of self crumbles without it. You can't perform confidence if your core is built on the shifting foundation of other people's moods. The architecture of real power starts with becoming someone worth knowing, not someone who needs to be known. It begins with developing competencies so sharp that your presence solves problems, not creates them. It emerges from building a reputation based on results delivered, not stories told. And it solidifies when people start coming to you not because you need them, but because they need something you provide. When you reach this point, something remarkable happens in your interactions. People start treating you differently, not because you've demanded it, but because you've earned it. They measure their words more carefully around you. They consider your time more valuable. They work harder to get your attention because they sense it can't be bought with easy flattery or manipulated with guilt. This shift creates a feedback loop that compounds your influence. The more people respect your boundaries, the stronger those boundaries become. The more they value your opinion, the more thoughtfully you develop it. The more they compete for your time, the more selective you become about how you spend it. You're not trying to be difficult. You're simply responding to the reality that your attention has become a scarce resource. But power without purpose is just sophisticated selfishness. The goal isn't to become an island, untouchable and alone. It's to become a lighthouse, self-sufficient and steady, but also useful to those who need guidance through dark waters. When you've built something solid within yourself, you can offer real help to others without depleting yourself. You can give without resentment because you're giving from abundance, not scarcity. This is where the Stoic and the strategist merge into something greater than either could be alone. You combine the Stoic's emotional independence with the strategist's practical wisdom. You maintain the Stoic's acceptance of what you cannot control, while exercising the strategist's influence over what you can. You embody the Stoic's indifference to outcomes, while employing the strategist's precision in pursuing them. People will try to understand what makes you different, but they'll struggle to pinpoint it. They'll sense that you've undergone some transformation they can't quite name. They'll notice that you don't react to provocations the way others do. Don't scramble for approval the way they expect. Don't break under pressures that would crush most people. And this mystery becomes part of your power. The final stage of this evolution is perhaps the most profound. You stop seeing rejection as failure and start seeing it as information. You stop interpreting indifference as insult and start recognizing it as opportunity. You stop experiencing solitude as punishment and start embracing it as laboratory, a place where you can experiment, create, and grow without the distraction of an audience. In this space, you discover something most people never find: the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the power of being complete. And once you've tasted that power, once you've felt what it's like to be genuinely self-sufficient rather than merely independent, you understand why the truly powerful seem so unshakable. They not performing strength. They living from a source that can't be shut off by others. This is the ultimate liberation. Not freedom from other people, but freedom from needing other people to be anything other than what they are. You can appreciate kindness without requiring it. You can enjoy companionship without depending on it. You can benefit from help without begging for it. And in this freedom, you become something rare in a world full of people performing their needs. Someone who operates from genuine choice rather than disguised desperation. When you reach this point, you don't need to tell people you don't need them. They feel it. You don't need to prove you're strong. Your calmness in chaos proves it for you. You don't need to claim you're powerful. Your ability to walk away from anything that doesn't serve you demonstrates power more clearly than any words ever could. And that's when everything changes, not just for you, but for everyone who encounters you. Because you've become something the world desperately needs, but rarely finds. Someone who can be counted on, not because they have to be, but because they choose to be. Someone whose loyalty means something because it can't be bought or manipulated. Someone whose presence adds value because it's never guaranteed. This is the architecture of true influence. Not built on what you can get from others, but on what you can offer when you need nothing in return. And once you've built something that's solid, that's self-sustaining, that's valuable, the world doesn't just notice you. It adjusts itself around you.